Welcome to the Human Evolution Podcast, where we dive deep into the science, philosophies, and strategies that create real and lasting change. I'm Goldstein, and here we leave traditional self-help behind and map the real terrain of true personal development.
So today's topic is people-pleasing, setting boundaries. First of all, just getting into the understanding of people-pleasing. How would you define a people-pleaser, like in your own setting?
So, wait. So are we getting started right away?
I guess.
Okay. So as we get started on this, it's like the reason why I want to talk about this so bad is because this is something that I see being very, very, very big in your life. I can see that you're one of the most amazing people I've gotten to know, and I absolutely adore having you in my life. But the one thing I see about you is how much weight you actually associate with making people around you happy. And to me, people pleasing it's something that it sounds like a great idea when you talk about it. Like, obviously you want people around you happy, but at some point in time, too much of a good thing, like too much sugar gives you diabetes, right? Like what I see inside of you is the fact that like it's no longer a desire. It has very much become something that is just inside of you as a need to keep the people around you happy, smiling, and good. And if they're not, I think it creates a lot of anxiety inside of you. And that's what I really want to talk about. It's not about people pleasing is not an issue. Chronic people pleasing is definitely an issue. And so the question you asked earlier, it's what is people pleasing to me? People pleasing, by definition, not a big deal. It's the idea of doing things to make people happy. The issue I have and what happens with chronic people pleasing, the thing I want to talk about, is when you change the way you would be or change who you are in order to make them happy. That's when it becomes an issue. When you actually it's the way I describe to my clients, you've got the totem pole of importance. When you put someone else above you on the totem pole because their happiness is more important than your own. So it is deprecating your self-worth and making someone else more worthy, someone else's happiness more important than your own.
Even though I know I'm doing it and I'm like more mindful now, especially after the retreat and after the other techniques I've been using, it's weird because inward or inside my head, I consider myself to be a little selfish. And I'm always thinking about like what I want to do and everything else. But when the words leave my mouth, it's the exact opposite. Like in my head, I'm like, I don't want to do that. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, hey, do you want to go there? And I'm like, I don't want to go there. But I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. I'm
of
like,
course.
Why did I just say that? Why did I just say that? So, yeah.
So you just actually said something that's also very important and said that you consider yourself to be a bit selfish. And this is often something that you see with chronic people pleasers. So let's kind of like it's what they call walk the cat back kind of thing. Like, so let's see how people pleasing starts. If you're a people pleaser just because you want to make people happy and it's not something that was a big deal for you in your childhood, not a big deal. The issue that happens with people pleasing, more often than not, I would say like 8 or 9 out of 10 clients for me, the real issue is at a very young age, they were told that what they're doing is bad. And so, for example, imagine that you are 2 years old and your mom asks you to do something and you have a conniption fit. You just go absolutely crazy about it. And so what happens is your mom in that moment will chastise you and say, Lee, what you're doing is wrong. You're being very selfish. And in that moment, your caregiver, the person that you rely on for nourishment, is now basically telling you that you are a bad person. And so what you say in that moment is, me being selfish is a bad thing. And that becomes that little child's way of looking at the world. So what happens is anytime that they see anything about themselves as being a selfish act, they start criticizing and judging themselves for doing that. And a little part inside of them says, well, if I do that for too long, people are going to abandon me, just like mom kind of threatened that she would. She didn't necessarily say those words, but that's what I was afraid would happen. And so what ends up happening is you sit there saying, I shouldn't be selfish. I should be completely giving. And the issue that brings about is the fact that like there's a part inside of you that says, well, you know what? I should be paying attention to myself. But there's another part inside of you that's sitting there saying, but if I do pay too much attention to myself, people will leave me. Little kid inside of you that learned it from mother not only says people will leave me, but says that if mom leaves me and I'm 2 years old, it means I'm going to die. So people pleasing is not an issue. The real issue at the deepest level is basically a fear of death. And that's where it becomes a real large issue for people, because that little child inside of them is so afraid that if they don't make everyone happy, eventually what that means is that they're going to die alone and in pain.
Whatever evolutionary path we took to get here, literally what happened to whatever our earliest ancestors were, if you weren't in the tribe, if you were like out on your own, what was the survival rate was not very long. But even in modern times, I think it's also, it's everywhere you look. And this is where it gets a little strange, because a lot of things like, religion and just things you see on TV and everything else, they're always promoting, do things for others, which is a wonderful message, by the way. I mean, it's just to be a good
And
citizen.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's weird because it's like a mixed signal. It's like give, and do all these things for others. There's not a lot of people out there saying, take some time for yourself, do what you want to do. So we're getting, in order to like integrate into society and feel like we're being a contributing member of society and a good family member or whatever, we're just always kind of told, put somebody else first, never put yourself first, which is not a terrible message, but I think that that's been taken too far.
Nothing wrong in that message, but when it starts becoming an element of self-control or an element of control as a whole, what ends up happening is it stops being a response towards making other people happy, and it starts being a response towards a fear. And that's where the issue is. I'm perfectly fine. I consider myself to be quite a people pleaser. And it's not to say I've completely healed this within myself at 100% level either. But the thing that shifts for me is I don't want to be doing it out of a sense of need, obligation, or fear. I want to be doing it out of a sense of joy and desire to make other people happy, where the difference happens. And it's unfortunately in society today, just the way that it is society makes it such that you feel like if you don't give for others, you're being a very bad citizen. You're going to be ousted from the community. And that low part inside of you, like you said, evolutionary speaking, is saying, I'm going to be out the tribe and I can't survive by myself.
Now, especially social media doesn't help things, because people don't have the same face-to-face interactions, feeling ostracized. And of course, COVID didn't help things. All that perfect storm of people were kind of isolated as it were. And then the way we're just kind of disconnected. I'm old enough now to see what I'm doing and apply certain things. For example, I hate meetings, like for things that could be an email, a text message, or something else. Now, I'm not saying that all meetings are bad. Sometimes meetings are like, okay, we got so much to talk about. Let's all talk at the same time and get it all out there. That makes total sense. So right now my afternoons are free, except for today. And if somebody were to come to me and say, hey, we need to meet tomorrow afternoon, I would immediately say, yeah, sounds good. Put something on the calendar. Then I would immediately turn around and curse and be angry and be so mad at myself. And I don't know the knee-jerk reaction, I guess. Like, I don't know what it would take, what kind of exercises, what it would take. And I'm sure that you've worked with the clients before.
I want to discuss this.
To start shifting that shit.
Change the concept of people pleasing into the concept of fear of upsetting other people. And let's take it even one step further into the phobia of upsetting other people. So when you think about what a phobia is, and we've discussed this in other ways, and I always use the same example because, this was a big one for me. If you walk into a room and you're sitting down and out of nowhere, a huge spider jumps on the table, you get that moment of freaking out. You don't even think about it. And you all of a sudden say, oh my God, that could hurt me. That is something that can create a phobia for you. You're not expecting it. It comes out the blue. And all of a sudden your brain says, this is dangerous. Next time I see a spider, what happens is my brain, because it was such a shock, it takes it as something that is insanely dangerous for me. And wherever I see a spider, my brain basically says, this is dangerous. Get the hell away from it. Whereas if you just had a normal person walk into a room and see a spider, they just basically say, okay, fine, there's a spider there. So be it. It's going to eat flies, whatever it is. So what happens with a phobia is your brain doesn't think through the consequences of what would happen. It just automatically assumes this is bad and the consequences equal bad, death, whatever it is. It doesn't even really see what they are. It just naturally assumes that things are bad. So now when we take this to the concept of people pleasing, what ends up happening is inside of your brain that sits there saying, let's again say that as a 2-year-old, your mom said, Lee, being selfish is bad. It doesn't sit there saying, okay, fine. And if I do this, mom is going to punish me. What it says, if it is something that becomes really bad, at some point in time, your brain associated, if I continue to do this, my family is going to disown me. They're going to kick me out in the street and I'm going to live under a bridge and I will eventually die. Or not even eventually, I will die pretty quickly. And so what happens is at this point in time, when someone says to you, hey, Lee, let's put a meeting on the calendar, what that does to you is at a very deep backline level, that little kid sits there saying, if I don't say yes, bad things are going to happen. Doesn't really contemplate what those bad things are. It just says bad things are going to happen. And it becomes a reflexive action in terms of like, that means I should do it right away. And me, the whole thing I try to do with my clients as often as possible is break the same thing we did with you on drinking, is break the concept of being doing it as a reflexive action and putting in an extra moment of thought in the middle. that basically allows you to basically say, and if I don't do this, what happens? And the moment your brain does that, and it actually can go into more of a mature adult way of looking at it, and you go, if I say no, worst case scenario, you know what? I may actually lose this person as a client. I may actually lose this person as a friend. Not a big deal. And at that point in time, you can actually make the decision of saying, you know what, yeah, let's have the meeting. Or you can say, I don't want to have the meeting right now. And you're aware of the consequences and it's not a big deal. If you're not aware of the consequences and your brain straight away says, I've got to do this, otherwise bad things will happen, you're a people pleaser at the worst level.
The funny thing about meetings, is a good example, is 9 times out of 10, those people probably don't want to have a meeting either. They're just programmed to do it from the other side. So I bet you, or some of those people will be like, hey, do we really need to have a meeting? They'd be like, no, we don't. They'd probably thank me if I said, can I just make a loom for you, or like some other type of correspondence, to avoid that. But you're totally right about like the thoughts that run through my mind, because then it builds resentment. Then I'm angry that it ruined my day, that I'm, just the whole thing is it's a downward spiral, but in the moment, I swear to God, looking behind my face, looking out from my eyes, I'm like looking like I am now, like, that's great, let's do it. And in my head, I'm like, motherfucker, this, what a weird thing. And I know I'm not the only one that does that shit on a regular basis.
People pleasing is one of the largest problems in today's society. And like you said, to me, COVID was the exact opposite, weirdly enough. But a lot of people, when they started feeling that sense of alienation and ostracism away from people, just not being around people for so long, they started basically developing that fear. For me, it was the exact opposite. I was more of a people pleaser. COVID happened. And in my brain, what I ended up seeing was, you know what? I don't have people around and I'm actually loving my life. Like, this is actually a nicer way to be. And what happened for me was I became less of a people pleaser because I was like, I don't really need people in my life that bad. It's not that big a deal. It's like, as we spoke about in our previous session, I became a little bit more sociopathic in terms of the fact of like me, don't like me, I don't really give a shit. And it doesn't mean like most people that know me would tell you that I am still very much of a people pleaser, perhaps at still an unhealthy level to some degree. But me compared to what I was even 4 or 5 years ago, pre-COVID.
I feel like a lot of this could be alleviated by having boundaries, which was our next thing on our list here to get into. So to even avoid having to feel uncomfortable and everything else would be to have like a set of like expectations and boundaries.
I want to explain that a little bit. So
Sure.
The idea is, if I were to set you a rule, Lee, of like just basically saying, what I want you to do is I want you to have behind your head forevermore a statement saying, I'm not allowed to have more than 3 meetings a week. What happens then is whenever a person says, hey, Lee, let's have a meeting, and you go, sorry, policy states no more than 3 meetings a week, and I've already got 3 set. That is that people maintain boundaries. And basically what boundaries are in that way is, instead of them actually feeling bad for setting it up, they set up a rule that protects them from having to be the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. My rules are a bad guy. That does work. And that is one step towards it. But to me, the ideal is, yes, you definitely want boundaries, but you don't want to basically feel like you need boundaries in order to protect yourself from feeling bad. You want to have boundaries because that is just naturally where you are, where you just say like, you know what, I don't want to have a meeting. It's not that big a deal. I really try not to have more than X number of meetings a week. So boundaries make perfect sense, and we will definitely get into it in bigger detail. But the one thing I want to state is a lot of people use them as a way to take themselves off the hook by saying, I'm not the bad guy, my rules are the bad guy. And they were set by Ori, they were set by my business, they were set by whatever. That to me is not you fixing people pleasing, it's you coming up with a coping strategy, which is a great way to start. But it's the real way to go about this is to finally heal that kid inside of you that's afraid of death. And basically have it, like you said something really interesting before, that I wanted to say about the fact of, like you said, if I push back on the meeting, most people, the moment I push back, would say, do you know what? Yeah, you're right. Just give me the loom and life will be so good. Right? Like, that is putting in the extra thought that the child needs. You taking it past the level of bad things will happen and say, but what if I really did this? And you say, okay, fine. So the thing I thought that was so bad that was going to happen probably won't really even happen in the first place. And you know what? They may actually even be happy about it. In which case, you're not afraid of saying no. As a matter of fact, you actually feel more comfortable saying no. And you just deal with the consequences. A person might say, do you know what, Lee, I absolutely need this meeting. And then you say, okay, fine. So what do we need? Let's schedule it out. And you actually start setting up the boundary of how long you want the meeting to be. Not because you're saying, I need this boundary in order to, you just say like, okay, fine. I already said no. They didn't bite off my head. They said they need the meeting. So you say, okay, fine. So does it need to be an hour meeting or can it be a 5-minute meeting? Can we just like touch base on what's needed? And then you're in a place of just being completely centered for yourself, knowing what works for you, and just communicating about it in a very comfortable way. So the last thing I'll say about this, and then we will continue more, is the concept should be that you should be 100% radically honest about the way you feel about something, and understanding the fact that if the person is unhappy, that you're also willing to some degree to negotiate it through, to discuss it out and to make it work for them. And no one is going to bite your head off. And if someone does bite your head off, then get the hell rid of them. Like, it's like, I mean, like, they're probably not the healthiest person to keep in your life in the first place.
You know what I love about what you just said is I was thinking the same thing about having like a set of rules, or like, because I do try to have standing rules, of course, that I made up and that I would point to or turn to. The thing is that relies on the other party to have some social intelligence, whatever the phrase is, some social graces. Because I've had that happen before too, where I'm like, I only take meetings on Tuesdays, or and my Tuesday's already booked up, and then they'll suggest something else, or like I'll be on vacation until Sunday night, and they'll be like, okay, well, can we meet Monday morning? And then in my mind, I'm like, fucking asshole. I would never do that to somebody. But you can't count on other people thinking, because this happens to be a lot actually, where I'm like, hey, I'm super busy today. I'm not sure if I can pull this off. Maybe tomorrow. And what I mean is, I can't do
I don't
this
want to
at
do
all.
this.
Yeah. But some people are so dense that they're like, well, he said maybe tomorrow, so how about tomorrow at 6 p.m.?
So
you know what I mean? So you can't count on that.
So let me call you out on that.
Rules. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me call you out on that, because like that's a very important thing. So basically what you're doing is you are relying on the other person to have some form of social intelligence, as opposed to you just saying like, look, I don't want to have this meeting. And you don't need to be that rude about it, but say like, I don't feel like this meeting is necessary.
Yeah.
And people will give up respect for likability. That becomes a big issue. Like if you say no and you stand your ground, most people actually gravitate towards a sense of like, do you know what? Like Lee isn't a pushover. But you are so quick to basically say, to be so giving to the other person, that a person that's slightly more, and for lack of better wording, narcissistic around it, loves that and says, okay, fine. So you're back Sunday night. Fantastic. I'll take you first thing Monday morning. And you're like sitting there going, God damn it. Why'd you do this to me? But what you're not understanding is they didn't do anything to you, did it to yourself. You put yourself in that position by basically even making that an option, as opposed to saying, I don't think that this needs to be a meeting.
This is true, that I rarely remember things from meetings. I when I'm in a meeting, I'm just, my eyes are glazed over. It's, I have, and everybody's on the ADHD spectrum. People are way worse, need to be medicated. Some of us just get bored and start tinkering and going into other windows and everything else. So what I tell people is, if you want to put a meeting on the calendar, I have to record it anyway with one of my AI transcription things, and I have to go back and query that or ask questions. So does it make sense to waste the lead time going up to the meeting, and it's going to be on our brains, and then the time I have to go back? I'll be honest with people, and now I'm still being passive aggressive, because I'm still not saying we shouldn't do this meeting, but I'm doing my best to be like, just so you know, I'm not going to remember anything we talk about. So we're better off doing either an email correspondence that you can go back and read, I can go back and read, or a Loom. And we just say Loom, there's other companies out there, but Loom video that has a transcript. That is more efficient for me. And then people will still say, oh, we need the meeting. And then I take even more offense in my head, because I'm like, I just told them I wasn't going to remember this. Now they're just being assholes. So in my mind, because I'm expecting them to have the same thought process
social intelligence. Yeah.
Now I'm really angry at them, and I still have to go to the meeting.
What I need you to understand there is that your anger, it's like, and this happens for most people, anger for many people is by a different name. So what's going on there is you're afraid that you're going to upset them. So you set up all these extra rules. And then when they don't understand what you're really trying to say, you them as if it's their fault. And what I want you to understand is that as soon as you actually say exactly what it is you want to say, no longer relying on them to have to understand. You can always punch back, and many people will. Many people won't, many people will. But you can just basically say, like, I really don't think that this needs to be a meeting. Like, I really, really don't think this needs to be a meeting. And if a person keeps punching back, going, I really need a meeting, I really need a meeting, what you can in the back of your mind basically say is one of two things. Maybe this person absolutely really needs a meeting and I haven't understood it. Or maybe this person isn't the right person for me to actually maintain as a client. And both of those are perfectly, perfectly fine. Like, I mean, like, there's nothing wrong either way. But the thing that you're doing is you're missing out on being radically honest and assuming that the other person is going to read between the lines. And when they don't, you get upset with them. And that is just a little kid basically saying, I don't want to upset you, so I'm going to say things in a really polite way. And I hope that you actually understand me well enough that I don't need to ever come across as ever being rude or mean.
I wonder if it's a Midwest thing too. I'm from Michigan, but I was raised in Minnesota. There actually is a thing. It's called Minnesota passive aggressive. It's on T-shirts.
Yeah.
So I think that we're worse than some.
That it is culturally put into you, where some cultures are perfectly fine with the idea of no. It seems like our culture, and probably let's just say Minnesota is probably a little bit more so, that the idea of no just seems like you're being too rude or you're being too selfish or whatever it is. And that's just built into the culture in terms of like, you always want to be the friendly, polite guy that always smiles and always says yes. And there's many books around it. It was one of the biggest shifts for me was the idea of the difference between being kind and being nice. I'm guessing most people you talk to would say, you know what, Lee Payton's such a nice guy. And my logic is being nice is not a very good, thing for you to consider yourself to be. And to me, the difference between being kind and nice is kind means I'm going to do what's right. Nice means I'm always going to make you happy.
On the flip side of that, if somebody were to do what I do to people, to me, meaning if I knew somebody was just working for me, working with me on something, and I knew they were just placating, saying all the things that I want to hear, I would be upset because I'm like, well, I want them to be happy with what they're doing. I don't want them to be begrudgingly getting off a call with me or like, cursing me. I know we've talked a lot about meetings and everything like that, but obviously other things in life, I can't think of any specific examples out of mind, but like client work and everything else. I mean, this kind of applies to a wide range of things. I mean, people pleasing.
Every relationship has people pleasing in every single way, shape, and form. And the example I'll give you that we both worked with contractors. And the one thing I've realized is, for example, the Indian population, people actually live in India. They've got some thought in their mind with the contractors I've worked with. Let me not be too specific here in any way around that, is that they've got some thought in their mind very often that they don't want to make people upset with them. And so sometimes they'll actually tell you something that isn't actually accurate. With the contractors I've worked with, again, I'm going to be very specific yet again, that they will tell you something that isn't actually right, or they'll agree to your deadline even though that they know that they can't miss it, because at least then they can postpone the upsetness that happens. And so what they're doing is they'll be the yes people and they'll nod their heads at all the right time, and you're like, this is fantastic, this is exactly what I want. And then 2 weeks later, you're very upset with them. And to me, what I would prefer to have, and that's, I was actually talking to my girlfriend about this, about a contract I was recently working with, is I would prefer a person ahead of time to just tell me the truth about what the expectations are, so we're both on the same page and we're not in a place that we're lost along the way. And it's just, so like the example of the Minnesota thing or the India thing or whatever else, certain cultures are just more trained to be more kind, more nice, not necessarily kind, to be more obliging to another person, even though that they know that in the back end, they can't actually meet that.
And so go ahead.
What I was going to say is, so for you, for example, it's like you've been trained very specifically to just reflectively say yes and then get upset with yourself or the other person for accepting that yes. It's a very dangerous place to be, because eventually what's going to happen is you're going to start resenting the person for no fault of their own to some degree. Obviously, some of it may be their own fault. But at the end of the day, if you were just honest from the get-go about, you know what, I don't remember meetings well or anything else, just like, I don't feel like this needs to be a meeting. As a matter of fact, I think a meeting will be a waste of both of our time. Like, put in an email, we can hash it back and forth. If we still need a meeting after that we've hashed it back and forth and something is missing, of course we'll meet. I'm not against meeting you. It's not that I have any issue with you, but at the end of the day, what I really want here is a way that communicates best for us and allows us both to actually have what we need. Yeah. If that is your truth, you say it. It's just that simple.
It's remarkable how ingrained it is, like how knee-jerk it is. Even after all, like I said, the meditation retreat and all the meditating, everything else I've done, and I have a long ways to go, but all the growth I've had up until my age now, the point now, most things throughout the day that used to just be autopilot, like knee-jerk for me, like going for the cookies or, like whatever it was that was detrimental, like big and small, most things I can still make, I can pause and think like, okay, no, do I really need to have 6 Oreos right now? No, but it's weird because maybe it's because I'm faced with another human being and I'm not just looking at a package of cookies.
Actually, it's not that. It's, yes, you have no pause, so you have that moment. But what I'll say is, and it's back to the thing I mentioned before, is it's the fact that it's a phobic reaction. So you as a 43, 44-year-old, it's 44 now, right?
44, yeah.
Yeah. So yes, it's
extra crow's
you
feet,
as a good-looking, young-looking 44-year-old. Yeah. You as an obviously like 44 that looks like 25-year-old.
Yeah.
Think to yourself, you know what? This should be an easy reach for me. Like it's me just saying no is not a big deal. But what you don't understand is that there's a 2-year-old inside of you that has literally, and I'm not saying this like just in a small way, this is an absolute truth about what's happening, has a phobic reaction. When a person that has a phobia of spiders sees a spider, they don't sit there thinking, oh gosh, there's a spider, I should be afraid. In the back of their mind, the moment that they see a spider, it hits immediately. I'm scared. Same thing for you. What happens is the moment that a person conceptualizes the fact that you might make them upset, it's an immediate thing because it's a phobic reaction. And the thing that needs to happen is you need to get to the point of that 2-year-old inside of you, or 2-month-old, or 3-year-old, whatever it is, before the age of 7, for most people, understanding the fact that if you upset a person, this is not going to be the end of your life.
It's a strange concept too, because as you were saying that, I was also thinking about how good it does feel under most circumstances. People enjoy doing things for others, and how, like they say, somebody who's super wealthy has a lot of money. They get the most joy out of like helping and doing things for others. So there's this
Absolutely.
weird gray area between the two where you almost get like, I agree to do something even if I don't want to do it. And I have like a flash of dopamine because I'm doing something, and then it immediately turns to anger. It's just this really strange cocktail of emotions and things that run through my mind when I agree to do something I don't want to do, because I'm doing something for somebody and I feel good for a second. Then I get angry. Then I'm just like a storm in my head until whatever that event is that comes up.
What I would like to say about that is the concept of understanding that contribution is a human need, that we actually do want to contribute. We actually want to be good to others. We actually love the concept of love and connection with others. The challenge is when you have so much associated with it that you actually deny yourself along the way. So there's nothing wrong with you making other people happy. I think that's a beautiful thing. For example, I love working with people. It makes me really happy when I do it. But at the same time, if I only worked with people and didn't charge and completely starved myself in so many different ways, time-wise, financially, whatever it is, just for working on people, eventually I'm going to start developing resentment around it. Not that I don't like helping people, but at the end of the day, I also have to, there's that concept, and I know we discussed it before, like on every airplane, they say, before losing pressure, put the gas mask on yourself first and then help the other people. If you're so busy putting the gas mask on everyone else, you're the person that's going to end up dying of suffocation because you don't have the oxygen. First and foremost, you have to take care of yourself. And then obviously it's not like you sit there with a gas mask on your face and you sit there going, oh gosh, there's so many people dropping like flies. You obviously, as soon as you are taking care of yourself, help others, make the world a better place. But number one on your totem pole has to be you. And the fact that it isn't, to me, is very much symptomatic of a phobic response inside of you, of a little kid basically saying, if I don't do this, bad things will happen, and not necessarily understanding what those bad things are.
A million examples are flashing through my mind. Plus, I become less effective too. Whatever the task is, whatever the relationship is, you don't want the person on the other end being not as effective. Like for your practice, for example, if you just saw people day in, day out, and even though you're helping people and you're doing what you love to do, at a certain point, you're not going to be as effective, and then that's not good for the clients either.
You should understand the difference. So you just based on conversation, you actually hit the actual thing that makes a difference. You don't set a boundary in order to have a rule in place that you basically say, oh, I can't meet people more than 3 times a week. What you do is you say, if I don't set this boundary, you're not getting me. And in time, it's a self-loving thing. You basically say, like, this is my boundary in place because this is what I need in order to be the best version of myself.
I'm writing this down. Read the transcript. No, that's awesome.
So can you very easily see how the boundary all of a sudden naturally fits into place the moment self-love comes into it?
You're not getting my best, really. I mean, I could articulate that on a million different fronts, not just meeting wise. I know we're harping on that, but yeah.
No, but it's such a good example. Like, I mean, I think people can generally contextualize it into their own lives. But at the end of the day, it's just that concept of you sitting there saying, just very clearly in your brain, loving yourself enough to basically say, look, I can meet with you, but I need you to understand the fact that my brain is in 20 million different places. I'm going to have to rehash everything that we did in the meeting. I can do that once or twice a week, but if I do it more than that, what happens is I'm hurting so many other people in terms of doing this for you that it just doesn't work for me.
Let's say somebody really needs something done and they need it rushed. And it's not even like a meeting situation. It's just like something like an over-the-top request. And then I'm like, all right, well, I'm going to set my alarm for 4 a.m, drink caffeine too early, skip the gym, all the things that make me more effective, it's the same thing. The output isn't going to be as great because I'm not doing self-care.
Like another level, like, I mean, sometimes that is what you have to do, right? Like, I mean, like I mentioned it in our podcast, but I have spoken about this to our group. It's winding back 2 years. My girlfriend got a cancer diagnosis. Obviously, in those moments, you basically, like, I mean, your priorities shift for a moment, and you basically say, yes, I have to do this because this is what's necessary in order to move things through. It's not to say that you automatically put yourself at the top of the totem pole and that you, for every single decision ever, but you put yourself on the top of the totem pole in terms of like, because I love you so much, I'm ready to put you at the top of the totem pole for now because that's what you need, but I'm not going to leave you there forever. Necessary right now. If a person that is your biggest client that you absolutely love and never makes these kinds of requests of you says, do you know what, this is an absolute rush, Lee, can you please do this for me? And you push back to some degree and you say, is it really a rush? And they say, it really, really is. At that point in time, you say, you know what, I'm going to wake up at 4 a.m. I'm not going to go to gym. That's fantastic. But this is not something that I'm going to do for you multiple times, but obviously, like, I mean, I care enough for you. And I love you. And this is something I'm happy to do for you this one time. And I'm willing to forego my self-care routine this one moment. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, there's got to be like an end in sight, right? Or like a limitation. Only in case of emergency, break the glass kind of thing, where it's not like a recurring thing. We've given plenty of examples here. Most people can relate in their own lives. I mean, whether it's being stuck on calls all day, like I am or was, or other things, you can literally take what you've just said and the things I've gone through. You could apply it to any little thing. But what are some practical strategies and things that you would suggest, just starting off with the very basics? Like, what could one do today, start working through this? And it doesn't have to be drastic. Like you said, it doesn't have to be all of a sudden. You don't have to be dramatic about it, but what are like some initial things that people could do to start getting themselves in the mindset that they're able to apply those things?
First thing I'll say is, I mean, obviously just triage. And the idea of setting even strict boundaries for both yourself and other people in that moment can be a very, very intelligent thing. The idea of saying, I only take 3 meetings a week is a great way to start getting used to the concept of saying no. It's not to say that's a bad thing. It's just to say that that is step one on a process of just getting yourself to the place that you can just get some air for a moment. So I'm not against that. I'm just saying that shouldn't be your final outcome in terms of like, you know what, I set boundaries and everyone thinks I'm an asshole, but like or my rules are assholes and so be it, like so be it. So the first step is get your neck above water. It's like, I mean, like, so if you need to somehow create rules, do that. That is perfectly fine. But the bigger thing for me, and I'll talk about it conceptually first, is understanding where it really comes from. So we've spoken about this in our different talks to some degree, but like the concept is you're doing comes from a sense of need. I need to make people happy. Then what's going on is it's not the adult speaking, it's the child inside of you speaking. So one of my rules, and we've spoken about this before, is what I like to say is you're immature. And what I mean by that is you're not the person making your decisions. A tiny part of you from like years and years ago that had some kind of trauma is the one that's making these decisions. And when the child inside of you is making a decision, it comes in terms of like, I have to do this, otherwise bad things will happen. And it's also understanding, it's coming to the next step about that is as soon as you realize it's coming from a place of need, it's not basically beating yourself up. It's understanding the fact that people pleasing, however gentle it sounds, for many people began as a survival strategy. It was like, if I don't make people happy, then I'm going to get abandoned and I'm not going to be able to survive in this world. If I don't make my family happy, they're going to dump me on the side of the street, is what the child thought would happen. And so the next thing is it's some element of self-compassion and basically saying, okay, fine, I get it. What I'm doing here is it's not the fact that I'm trying to make people happy. I am genuinely afraid of people abandoning me and me dying. So this is not a fear of making people unhappy. This is a fear of death that's really happening here. As soon as you understand that, understanding that's coming from a place of need, the next step beyond that is to actually start showing that child, you don't need for this to happen, otherwise you will die. And the way you do that is, even in your mind, even after the fact, really playing, or even before something happens, playing inside of your mind with the concept of, what if I were to say no in this situation? And really playing out the worst case scenario in your brain and understanding the fact that even if things go terribly wrong, I'm still not going to die. I'll lose a client. I'll lose a girlfriend. I'm going to estrange myself from my family. I'm going to lose income, whatever it is. But I'm still resourceful enough that I'll probably still survive through this. What happens is, as soon as that shifts, what happens is the child no longer needs out of a place of survival to make that happen. The child actually goes to a place of like, the bad things will happen, but I'm going to be okay. And then it becomes a strong desire. And then as you start soothing yourself from a place of like, I get it, you're really afraid, but it's not that bad a thing. And then adding in the concept, and I'm throwing in the third step of it, the fourth step of it is the concept of radical honesty. Speaking your truth to people and understanding the fact that if people don't like it, that's their problem and not yours. Saying like, do you know what? I'm really bad at meetings. I don't want to have another meeting because it just doesn't work for me. And again, we're using that as an example. And because that is your truth, when a person says, what about Tuesday? You go, I think you missed my statement. I said I'm bad at meetings. It's like, it's not about the date. It's like, meetings aren't going to work for me unless they're absolutely essential. When they are, I'm very happy to be there and they work for me. But in this case, I don't think it's necessary. And that is my truth. It's coming from inside of me, and so be it. And if you don't like it, I've played through that scenario in my head enough. Okay, fine. So maybe we're just not the right match for each other. So be it. No longer fear of death. No longer that sense of needing to make that person happy. It just comes in terms of the concept of being kind and saying, I'm going to try and make you happy. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to self-sacrifice myself on such a level that making you happy makes me resent you. Have healthy relationships in my life.
No, I love that. I was actually thinking of something I've got this afternoon, that Tuesdays are my meeting days. And what I've started doing now is I'll go for walks. Like this afternoon, I walk twice a day here, and I do about 4 miles each. So a good part of my day is out walking anyway. This isn't fixing the problem, but it's a baby step, because the people I have to talk to this afternoon, everybody gets on Zoom together and everything else, but there's really nothing to show or share, because I send them a Loom ahead of time. I send them a Loom while I'm fresh. It's in my mind, so I don't have to think on the spot while we're on the call. But a lot of times I'll do that. I'll go for like a little walk, and I'll call in and I'll tell them, hey, look, I'm out walking now, just so you know. I can still see things on my phone. I can see somebody at a screen share, but that's like a baby step towards like, I'm still attending these things, but I'm going to get some exercise while I'm doing it. And along those lines of, okay, like what can I do to slowly dial out and feel more comfortable saying no to things? So the stuff you said in this show already, I mean, those things I can apply, because I was doing for the longest time like backpedaling with the whole like, ooh, I'm pretty tired tomorrow, but maybe kind of thing, and just being a little wishy-washy with it. But it also helps to frame it in the sense that it's literally a survival thing, and it's not just social graces. Like, I'm just trying to be nice. Like, it's something inside of me from way back in the day is equating not attending things or doing certain things with survival versus just being uncomfortable. And I think that must be where that knee-jerk, really hardcore, overpowering feeling comes from.
Like, let's just play around with like, it's in super, super quick. Obviously in session it would be much longer, whatever it is, but just super, super quick. Think about a recent experience where you said yes to a meeting that you didn't want to say yes to, or a future experience that you think that kind of thing would happen again. Just choose something that's very specific, a specific person that you've had that knee-jerk reaction of saying, this is the way it's going to be. You got it? Okay. Yep. Now, in your mind, what I want you to do is, instead of stopping with, if I say no, bad things will happen, mind, just for a moment, just go even deeper and say, what would happen if I said no? And really play it out in your mind. You don't need to speak out loud like this is in the comfort of your own brain, but really play it out for a moment and really just be realistic with yourself. What would happen if I said no? Your mind takes you with that. The next thing I want you to do is just play around with, and what would happen then? And then. As you play around with that and you really get very, very realistic with yourself, what you're doing is you're stopping the phobic reaction. So, for example, again, I'm just going to jump through to the concept of a spider. That shifted my phobia of spiders. I'm not a big fan of spiders, but shifted the phobia was getting from the point of, oh my God, there's a spider, and if it bites me, I'll die. It happened to sitting there going, most spider bites are usually about as bad as a mosquito bite. So if the worst thing happens and a spider bites me, I'll probably have to put on cortisone cream. If a brown recluse bites me and it gets really, really bad, there's antivenom. There's treatments for, I think, pretty much every single spider bite that I would discover in Florida, at the very least. I'm not saying if it happened in the Amazon, it would be different. But I'm in such a society such that if the worst case scenario happened, bad things will happen. Yeah, I'll have to go in ER. I'll have to go in urgent care. Bad things will happen in that way. But it's not as bad as my brain is making it out to be. And as soon as you start asking that, what would really happen if? What you're doing is you're stopping the child from stopping the story. You're letting the story continue to a natural outcome. And then the thing that scared you so much all of a sudden has an ending and it's not so scary.
Some of these feelings are the phobia, the knee jerk, survival thing, say yes to things. Some of it also is tied to the whole, like what other people are thinking. Like, oh God, are they going to think I'm, lazy or terrible or just being a dick?
Yeah.
And then I have to remind myself, because I preach this all the time, but I don't always follow it. People aren't thinking about me. Everybody's thinking about themselves, like literally everybody's
100%.
just thinking about themselves. I could say no to somebody on something. They may be like, oh, that asshole, whatever. And then 5 minutes later, they're literally thinking about, not even 5 minutes later, 5 seconds later,
But even if you took it to its natural outcome of like, you know what, they do think I'm an asshole and they complain to their friends about it, whatever it is, and gets messed up in that portion of the industry. Even if you play that out and you actually like sit there going, you know what, they do think I'm a dick, and they talk to all their friends about it. What then? Then I lose that portion of the industry. What then? Then I find a new industry to work in. What then? I need to change my job, whatever it is. As soon as you play it out completely, the whole thing here is it's not to say bad things don't happen. It's understanding the fact that even if bad things happen, you're resourceful enough that you will deal with it. And you need to understand that the thing that's going on in your brain right now is if I say no, I will die. That happens instead of that is a step forward for that little kid. If I say no and I end up living under a bridge, but I will survive under a bridge, is still better for the kid than if I say no, I will die.
Speaking in terms of like our jobs, for example, you do a lot of in-person things, but we do remote things. The world has a lot of remote jobs. So I have the luxury of that now. That thought has crossed my mind before too, where like, oh man, I just made that so-and-so at that company mad. Then I'm like, wait a second, there's 8 billion people on the planet. So, I mean,
Amen.
what are the chances that, I know that some people don't have that same scenario. Like they may work in a small office with 3 other people, and there could be a lot more issues there involved in that. But still, like there are a lot of people, a lot of jobs, and a lot of opportunities out there. The worst case scenario, just go work somewhere else, and it probably won't come to that.
Exactly. But like you do need to talk that kid off the ledge, right? Like you need to get to the point of like understanding the fact that it's not that big a deal. And this is where I love that. And I'm not going to take you through it again because I've taken you through it twice on our podcast. But the idea of the 500-year scenario where you basically say like bad things happen and I deal with them. And then more bad things happen and I deal with them. And then eventually I've dealt with all the shit. And you realize the fact that whatever happens, I'm going to survive through it. And to me, like and this is my own personal spiritual beliefs, but I'm not asking anyone to subscribe to them. But like to me, even the concept of death doesn't seem like that big a scary thing to me anymore. Like, I mean, like, okay, fine. So bad things happen and I end up on the street and I end up dying of starvation. Don't get me wrong. I don't want that to happen. But like, even that doesn't scare me as much as it used to in terms of like, it's like your brain doesn't even think of, I will die. It just says bad things will happen. When you take that one step further and you say, okay, fine. So like get to a different place. If I get on that flight and the flight crashes, okay, fine. It'll probably be a very quick death and it would suck. But like, I mean, what am I going to do? Just like, I mean, completely limit myself for that 0.0001% probability of something like that happening? Or am I just going to start living my life again? That is where that concept, and that's the thing I really want to talk about, is the idea of just asking, and then what? And then what? And then what? And whatever bad case scenario it is, just kind of like soothing the kid and saying like, and if that happened, okay, and then what? Yeah, and the last thing I'll say about it, and it's just to like reiterate, is then what happens is people pleasing stops being, in which case you can actually start speaking your truth. And that's the next step, is going to a place of radical honesty and saying like, I'm going to tell people where I stand, obviously try and bend myself as much as possible without losing my place on the totem pole.
That I'm going to try this a couple times this week just to see what happens. I know what the outcome is going to be already. Everything's going to be fine, but I'm going to put it into action. I'm going to see if I can record it also.
Love it.
I'm going to see if I can record
absolutely
it,
love it.
Yeah.
It's more so than anything else. Like, I mean, you can share it with the viewers, but more so than anything else for yourself, like as you actually try it out, the more you prove to yourself that this was just a crazy thing that your brain was doing, the more you actually allow that kid to start relaxing. And that is what we want here.
And I found that with free time and more, not just placating other people and doing what they want me to do based on their schedule, I've had much better ideas, sleeping better. I mean, it's all one big holistic thing. And everything counts. Like there was always this thing in the past where output, like it has to be measurable, but sometimes not having an afternoon booked with crazy stuff or having to do things for other people all the time, unless it's something that you want to do and everything else. A lot of things can come out of just going for a long walk and not doing anything. So having that time back has been really nice, and I plan to get more of it back. So anyway, our next show that we're going to put out, we know this time. We're doing it right this time. I almost jumped into the whole, speaking of near-death experiences, because I do want to talk about that at some point too. I think I told you I read that book by that physician. I can't think of his name, but
Brian Weiss, that one?
No, I wish I could think of his name. It's a very common name, and I'll think of it. But I do want to get into that because he has this website where he collates all the near-death experiences all over the world, and what's very interesting. And I know we're like off topic now, but it's great because me, I'm not really religious. I'm spiritual in a sense, but after looking into some of that stuff, just speaking in terms of like worst case scenario, the plane crashes or somebody dies, there's some very compelling evidence for they studied children in India that had an NDE, near-death experience, versus somebody in Canada they'd never met, and the child in India had never been on the internet or whatever, and like the experiences were very, very similar. So for anybody listening who is worried about canceling a meeting and dying, don't worry, everything's fine afterwards. You go towards the light, everything else. But in our next episode, we are going to have Brittany Carpenter back on, dietitian Brittany. We have some things coming up.
I love that girl.
Yeah, absolutely. She's amazing. And we're going to finally do kind of a deep dive. We're going to sit down where I'll be asking both Ori and Brittany questions about, their origin stories, so to speak. I just saw Deadpool the other day, so I had Marvel origin stories popping in my head.
Yeah.
Oh God, it's so funny. Oh God, it's great. It's so raunchy and funny it's so great. It's such a great movie. So we will be talking of your origin story, Brittany's origin story, and the things that you guys do. We're going to actually like lay it out instead of sprinkling it into other episodes. And then we're going to talk about why those apply to the joint things we have coming up. We have a lot of exciting things coming up with the two of you working together. So that'll be next. And I think that's all we've got to say today. I could ramble on about this shit. I am caffeinated. I have meetings to get to, though. So until next time, my friend, to be continued. Appreciate it as always.
Have a great one, man.
Hey, everyone, it's Lee. Just one more thing before you go. If you've ever wondered if journaling could change your life, you can find out for free by downloading the Emotional Alchemy Journal from the link in the description. Also, if you're looking to connect with people who are just as passionate about growth as you are, check out our Facebook community. It's a great place to discuss what you've heard on the podcast and get access to exclusive content and sessions that are only available there. Just search for Human Evolution Movement on Facebook, or you can find the link in the description. Until next time, keep challenging the chaos within, be a little kinder to yourself, and let's continue to evolve together.